them dreams so big that they'll haunt you, or they'll calm you. That's how you know if you gotta go and get to win and not conquer. I had to go out and get it without a sponsor. Kept it real, never crooked, yeah, that's honor. Now I can go out and get it how I want to. Hashtag bless, I choose.
What is up, Rumble, YouTube, and Twitter? Welcome back to the Ryan Matta Show. And today is going to be a great interview. We're going to dive into all things crypto taxes with the CEO of Decrypt Tax. His name is Ernest Lee. I won't overtalk it. If you guys are interested in learning more about the company or his products, please swing down in the description at the very, very bottom of the show notes are links to all of his pages. You can see his crypto. You guys can swing over here and please consider following this gentleman. Ernest, welcome to the show, my friend.
Hey, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Hey, man. So tell us a little bit about your company. Tell us a little bit about yourself first, and then tell us a little bit about your company.
Sure thing. Well, I'm a tax attorney myself. Been doing it for too long, 20 years. So I started Decrypted Tax in 2020. I had a number of clients in my tax practice that had exposure to digital assets, and I just wanted to kind of spin off and focus. And I invest myself. I've been investing since 2020. Yeah, so we have clients from as small as 100 transactions a year to 200,000 transactions a year. And so we do taxes specifically for clients that have exposure to digital assets.
So walk us through a little bit about what's that like? What is the landscape? Is it different in every state? Can you kind of give us how is the government even going after people that aren't claiming their taxes on crypto, or how are they getting audited? Or
Sure. So we regularly represent clients that are in audit. A few years ago, maybe about 6 years ago, the IRS put a checkbox on the tax return that said I've owned digital assets. And that checkbox, the interesting thing about that is most people think you have a 3-year statute of limitations on your tax return. But in reality, you have a 3-year statute of limitations on a tax return that's properly filed. And if you didn't check that text box and you had exposure to digital assets, then that statute of limitations extends. And so we amend tax returns for clients when they have digital asset exposure. And in many cases, they had losses in prior years that can offset the gains of the current year.
Wow. And how strict is the government getting on these crypto taxes? Are a lot of people getting, I guess, audited, or are they opening investigations into people and like really diving deep into it?
They're not diving deep. They're diving. We've seen an uptick in the number of audits, the number of correspondence audits, which are just basically, hey, send us a letter, let us know what you're doing with your digital assets, because we gotta, the IRS gets notifications from some of the exchanges, the U.S. exchanges, and they know when you've had assets in crypto. And that one of the things that is interesting about blockchain technology is that the IRS has access to everything that's on a public ledger. So if they see a wallet moving stuff into a exchange, and then they see it move out to a different wallet, well, they can track those different wallets, and they're using COINBASE. They can track all that in and out movement.
And what are the tax brackets for people? Like how are you supposed to be paying taxes? Like, is it every single trade that you make? Can you kind of walk us through and give us the elevator overpitch about how that works?
Sure. So let's say you move cash into Coinbase and you buy Ethereum and you move it out into a wallet and you trade that Ethereum for Dogecoin, and then you move it back onto a different exchange and you sell that asset and buy Bitcoin. So you sell it for USDT and then you buy Bitcoin. So each step along the way, there's a taxable transaction, or at least there's a transaction that you need in order to track your tax basis. So when you move your cash onto Coinbase and you buy a digital asset, that your cost basis in that digital asset is the amount that you moved into the exchange and the amount that you paid in exchange fees in order to buy that asset. And then when you trade that asset for a different digital asset, you have another taxable event, and your cost basis then is determined by your value that you had in the digital asset. And then you bought, we said Dogecoin. So when you bought the Doge, you have a different tax basis. And then when you move it off exchange to a wallet, you don't have a taxable exchange, but you have to track that basis. So we call them tax lots. And so tax lot tracking is what we do on our website. We have a program that's been provided to us by Node 40, one of the leaders in tracking digital assets. And Node 40 will track individual tax lots for us so that we can report it properly on your tax return.
Wow, that sounds like it makes things so simple for people that are constantly buying and selling. I mean, is it almost impossible for somebody that actually buys and trades crypto and tries to make this into a side hustle? Is it impossible for them to actually properly report their taxes without a tool or software like that?
It's not very well. If I didn't have this software myself, and I do this all day, every day, it would be very difficult. We've done it with spreadsheets for a number of years, and it gets more and more difficult when you look at tax lots as though, let's say you were buying gold coins, and you have these gold coins that you bought back in 2015, and you have gold coins that you bought today, and now you just sold some gold coins today. So what we do is we identify through specific identification, we identify the highest end first out. So whatever you paid the most for is what we're going to say is what you sold today. And that way you minimize your tax liability in a given year. That gets really complicated when you have fractional sales, when you have a limit order, and you place a limit order like I do every day, but you place a limit order and it takes 100 microtransactions in order to fill. So when those 100 microtransactions that have filled at different levels, each one of those is an individual taxable event, and you need to track that. And so that's where the software comes in handy.
It seems so interesting to me. And how do your clients come to you? Like, what is the, is there a threshold? I mean, are they going after people that just maybe bought one Bitcoin and took it off exchange? Is that something that the average person is going to have a microscope up their ass for, or is it more so big players?
Any transaction that you have is going to be tracked. There are limitations. People ordinarily look at the $600 limitation for 1099s as a threshold. But technically, if you had a $40 transaction, you still have a taxable event, and you still should report that on your tax return. The biggest thing we have with clients coming in is they've done a lot to try to avoid taxes, which tax avoidance is legal, tax evasion is illegal. So they've done a lot to try to minimize their tax liability, but they don't necessarily know the ins and outs and how to do it properly. And we educate, and then we also do the things properly. And in many cases, we end up with a better result than the taxpayer would have ended up with if they'd done it their way.
We're getting, I don't know if you've spent a little bit of time on TikTok over the last couple of months, but the not paying taxes 2024 is going viral right now over on TikTok. And it's people that are so broke that they're even having to choose between paying their taxes and feeding their children right now. And it seems like it's getting worse and worse with inflation's about to go skyrocketing again. People aren't going to be able to afford to live. How does that play out when like how does our government literally take everything from you, your home, your ability to feed your children, when we're paying these people 43% of every penny we make? How does that sit with you? What do you think is going to happen to these people?
Well, I mean, I'm torn. It sits with me in a way that I really think we need to work on our tax code. There's a lot of things that could be done to make it more efficient and fair across the board. There are many things that have gone too far, that just are overreaching by the government, and so we regularly represent clients that are in positions like that, where they have to choose between their needs at their household and paying their taxes, and we negotiate payment arrangements, which in many cases the payment arrangements aren't that bad. Or we negotiate for the IRS to forgive portions of the debt, where the taxpayer is in a position where they literally cannot afford to pay the tax due, and we have to submit documentation. You have to show proof that you can't afford it. But at the end of the day, the IRS isn't there to squish everyone. They're there to they're there to take a little bit. It's kind of like you get, if you're a fisherman, if you're gonna fish everything in the sea, well, you're not gonna have any fish. So they just take a little bit at a time away in order to pay for whatever they've decided they need to pay for this year. But at the end of the day, having good tax advice, whether it's us or someone else, is going to benefit you tenfold.
And what is like the worst? So if these people aren't paying their taxes, what ends up happening? How long does it take the IRS to finally, some of these people I'm watching on there, I haven't paid taxes in the last 7 years. Some of them have they have a loophole where they go through, they file taxes a specific way and they're exempt, or so. It seems like everybody's a tax expert on TikTok, and I don't trust any of them. But
Yeah.
I hear a lot of these people just say they haven't paid their taxes in 7 years or 8 years or however long it is. How long does it take them to come after the average person?
The average person, it takes them 3 years to come after them. That being said, even if you haven't paid in the last 10 years, the mechanism I was speaking of earlier, the offer and compromise, it's a way to tell the IRS what I have and what I've made, and kind of throw your hands up and say, listen, I can only afford to pay this much. And assuming that you're telling the truth and you can only afford to pay that much, the IRS is really willing to work with you.
Yeah, I don't know how with their you're seeing this rental crisis, which we already had a property crisis, and people can't afford to pay their rent. And now our government's offering these apartment complexes and landlords 2 times the going rate of rent if they'll house illegal immigrants. So they're taking your tax dollars now and using your tax dollars to basically drive you into poverty and drive your family into homelessness. And people can't afford to pay their rent. It's hard for these people out there, man. And I think it's just going to keep getting worse and worse and worse. I don't know how anybody's going to be able to afford it. Is there, when you say that they'll work with you, what does that mean? You're already behind on your taxes. You can't even afford to pay taxes. So then they okay, just give us $100 a month, and then
That's
you're
right.
going to be behind again next year.
Well, no, the best I've seen, I had a client that owed over $1.5 million. And they were able to negotiate. We were able to negotiate them down to roughly $200,000, and that $200,000 was paid over time. So the effect of it was as though they were. If they would have had $20,000 right away, because the time value of that money over it was a 5-year payment plan, 6-year payment plan. Far outweighed what the tax liability would have been.
Wow, that's impressive. That's really, really impressive. So tell us a little bit about yourself. When was, you said your first time you got into crypto was in 2020? Was that, were you just speculative, or one of your clients came to you and was like, hey, I want to pay you in crypto? And you're like, what's crypto?
No, in 2014, I had a client who came, or 2013, I had a client who was mining Bitcoin on a laptop, and I did not understand what he was doing. And I have to admit, I was really skeptical. You know, I was TradFi bound. I worked at Deloitte in London, doing taxes for private equity, and I kind of knew my guardrails where I was, and I wasn't really apt to get outside of that comfort zone. But after a while, 2016 was my first. Someone approached me to invest in Bitcoin, and I turned them down. Yeah, I relived that conversation again and again. But 2020, I finally decided. We had about 20 clients that had crypto exposure in my other tax practice, and we really decided. I had one, Lincoln Allard is a associate at the firm. He had access. I mean, he had exposure to crypto himself, and so he had some experience with it. He's the one that had been doing the tax returns for the clients we had that had exposure to it. And I went to Lincoln and I said, you know, man, what if we just kind of spun this off into a new practice and focus primarily on that? And he was game. He's on board. He does taxes for us all day, every day. If somebody schedules a free consultation, you'll get either Lincoln or myself. And we just decided to go all in. Myself personally, I trade. I have what is it, Kraken up here right now on my screen. I traded over the weekend, did really well on that dip. But I feel like I've done a deep dive into just about every wallet exchange. Recently got myself a Palau ID because I had a number of clients that were getting Palau IDs, and I wanted to see what that was about. But yeah, I have exposure to it myself, and I understand it.
And what are your thoughts on the, what is it, Palau IDs? How does that work?
Yeah, so the interesting thing about Palau ID, other than taxes, because U.S. taxpayers pay tax on their worldwide income regardless of where it's earned. But a Palau ID can give you access to non-U.S. exchanges that don't ordinarily allow U.S. customers to be on the exchange. And so the KYC process for someone with a Palau ID, for instance, a number of the exchanges will allow you to be on their exchange. Whereas as soon as they found out you were a U.S. taxpayer, they wouldn't allow it. And that's just because of their reporting requirements and regulatory requirements. But some of the non-U.S. exchanges have they have different mechanisms that you can use that aren't available here in the U.S. Some of the lending, some of the leveraging is higher. Now, higher leverage comes higher risk, and so the U.S. is kind of particular about protecting its taxpayers from the downside risk. But non-U.S. exchanges have a lot of that stuff available.
And are those, so if you're trading in exchanges that operate offshore, then they're not reporting to the U.S. IRS, then, correct?
They aren't reporting, but you still have an obligation to report.
Oh, absolutely. That's crazy. And where do you, my question about the taxes is, what are the brackets? How much are people paying? Like if you're trading, you're paying what capital gains tax is it? If you're holding for over a year?
Rate. There's a 0% rate for a single taxpayer, a 0% rate up to it's a little more than $40,000. And then for a married filing jointly, it's a little more than $80,000 per year that you can have capital gains at the 0% rate. And then you have a 15% rate and then a 20% rate. And most taxpayers, I think the 20% rate doesn't kick in until about $470,000. So most taxpayers fall into either the 0% rate or the 15% rate. That's something that's important to remember is at the 0% rate, let's say you're married filing jointly, you've got $80,000 of capital gains that you can realize every year at 0%. And so you'll want to go ahead and step up your basis. There's a lot of talk about tax loss harvesting where you harvest your tax losses in December, which is essentially selling your digital asset that's in a loss in order to offset your capital gains that you had earlier in the year. And so tax loss harvesting works, but so does tax gain harvesting, where you're harvesting all of everything that you have available to you at 0%. Because essentially, if you bought Bitcoin at $20,000 and then it ran up to $100,000, well, you have $80,000 in long-term and capital gain. That's short-term or long-term. Short-term is less than 1 year, long-term more than 1 year. But in the tax year, let's say you had that big of a gap, and then you can go ahead and sell that Bitcoin at a 0% rate, and you step up your basis to the 100. So then next year, when it goes from 100 to 180, and you sell it and buy it back, now you have $80 more thousand dollars with a 0% capital gains, and your tax basis in that Bitcoin is now 180. You keep doing that year over year, and you can realize in a 5-year period, you can realize $400,000 worth of gain at 0%.
Whoa, that's pretty cool. That's really, really cool. So, and what does it cost somebody to come and use your service? What do you guys charge? Is it based off the amount of money you have or the amount of trades you make, or how does that work for you guys?
It's based off the number of trades you make. And generally speaking, doing the taxes for the Form 8949, which is the Schedule D that you report all your taxes, you report all your capital gains. The lowest rate on that is $120. And so for $120, somebody can get in. They can put they can link in their APIs. They can put their information on our tracking software, and we'll give you your 8949 and your Schedule D that you need to file with your tax return. If you have more than 10,000 transactions, that goes up to $250. 100,000 transactions, it's $600, and unlimited transactions, it's $900. And that's with the portfolio tracking that we have on our website. And so the portfolio tracking is important because, as I talked about earlier, the 0% rate for certain capital gains and the tax loss harvesting position or planning that you can do in December, you'll get targeted emails from our software that'll let you know when you have moves that you can make before the end of the year in order to minimize your tax liability. Now, most of our clients choose the Schedule D, and they file their tax returns on their own using the information that we've given them. But we also do full service tax preparation, which I say most, 40% of our clients use the full service tax preparation. And if you have up to 1,000 transactions, that full service tax prep is only $600. And then 10,000 transactions, it goes up to $1,200. 100,000 transactions, it goes to $2,500. Unlimited transactions is $3,500. And so we do full service. You know, your Schedule D, your Schedule C's if you have a home-based business, your Schedule E's if you have rental income, or if you have a partnership interest or a trust. So we do all of that. We're also, I'm a lawyer myself, so I also do set up LLCs for individuals that have trading activity and they want to run a lot of their expenses through the LLC. We're a full service tax preparation and planning.
And so say somebody has, because I got a lot of friends that use the crypto trading bot platform. So they're running, I mean, probably about 10 million a month. And I would say the average person that has $100,000 on an exchange and uses these bots is probably bringing in profit about 5,000 a month, maybe 7,000 a month profit, but they're doing 10 million in volume at,
Yep.
$500 to $750 per trade, but things trade 1,000 times a day.
Right.
Is that something that you would recommend somebody setting up like an LLC and running that as a trading business? And then
Yes.
tell me a little bit about that.
Well, ordinarily, yes, that is a good plan. If you have that much trading activity, running it through an LLC will allow you to deduct the related expenses that aren't ordinarily available when you report it on a Schedule D. And for someone like that, our full service tax prep, so that person would have a million transactions in a year. Our full service tax prep for that is still be $3,500.
And what is what can you tell us a little bit about trust? Are you familiar with trust? I hear a lot of people in the crypto space talking about setting up a trust and putting their crypto assets in a trust because it can't be taxed or taken from the government. Is there any truth to that?
Well, there is and isn't. Trusts are taxed on their retained earnings. So if a trust doesn't distribute any of its income for the year, it'll be taxed at the corporate rate for the retained earnings. But if it distributes that income, then the beneficiary of the trust gets the tax on that income. So there's still tax. It's just who pays it. And a trust is good. So I talk a lot about who's gonna own your crypto when you die. I've had a number of clients who've had loved ones die and not had access to the beneficiaries haven't had access to the private keys, so they don't know how or where to find where these digital assets are. And so a trust is a good way to set it up so that you have some type of planning in the event of a death or a disablement. That's something we regularly set up.
And how are people protecting those private keys? For example, like like I set up a trust and say I wanted it to go to my son when I died, and I keep a set of private keys on me. Is that something that I would physically let an attorney hold on to these private keys in like a smart contract, or how do you even protect that from being trusting a third party?
You would have to find a trusted third party. So attorneys generally speaking, attorneys are trustworthy to do that. I know attorney and trustworthy in the same sentence. But attorneys have an obligation to their clients, and they're not going to sacrifice their license for a breach of that trust. But the important thing is to set up a trustee, or either through an attorney or through a trusted third party, or someone that you trust, someone that most people have someone that they would trust with a second key. So, you can trust, multi-sig wallet where you've got a third party that is the trustee, and you've got an attorney who administers the trust. He's the administrator of the trust or administrator of an estate. And so multi-sig is the best way to go there.
Yeah. And you guys, and what is the cost if somebody wanted to have you guys set something like that up?
That would be somewhere between $1,000, $2,000. It just depends on the complexity.
That seems very fair. Every price that you've given out seems very fair. Is that how is that competitive wise with your competition? And
yeah, our prices are actually competitively priced. They're fairly low. The prices that I have for the portfolio tracking are less than what we pay Node 40 for the software, but it's a way to get clients in to show them the other services that we have and what's available. Our prices for legal work are generally competitive with the marketplace, and in many cases our prices are based on time. So if you went to another attorney who didn't understand digital assets, they're going to spend a lot of time educating themselves, and they're going to bill you for that time. And so I've already got that education, so I don't have to bill for that time.
No, that's very well said. Gary Cardone, I don't know if you've seen the interview I did with Gary Cardone, but he's a huge fan of Node 40. I think he is actually an investor, an owner, or
He's an
something.
investor of 40.
And so tell me, what do you think? What do you think's happening with Bitcoin right now? Let's pivot the conversation. Or is there anything else you wanted to cover about Decrypt? Because I want to make sure that you had the opportunity to tell everybody about it. If you guys are just watching and just joining us, if you swing down to the very, very bottom of the show notes, links to Decrypted Tax is down below. This is their Twitter handle. You can reach out to them directly. They got their DMs open over there on Twitter as well, so it's easy to get a hold of these guys and ask them any questions. But is there anything else you wanted to cover? I want to make sure I give you ample time.
Questions is important. So we schedule free consultations on our website all day, every day. And so any extra time that I have available, myself or Lincoln have available, we're doing free consultations where we, at absolutely no obligation, we'll walk through what you're doing and give you free advice on what you should be doing. And whether you take that advice or don't, that's up to you. Whether you engage us to help you take that advice, or you engage someone else, that's up to you. So it's absolutely no charge. What do I think about what's happening with Bitcoin today? So over the weekend we had a dump, and I'll preface it with, I'm not a financial advisor, but I do invest. And so when I see a dump like that, and I saw what the impetus for it was, I admit I sold a very large bag of Bitcoin, and I bought it back about $2,000 cheaper. So I mean, that's where I make the most of my money, buying and selling Bitcoin.
Really? And are you just going off, you've been trading for a long time, you have software that kind of gives you buy and sell signals, you a trade the news kind of guy? What's your strategy?
Well, the fundamentals are important, trade the news. They're important in certain instances, but a lot of times you won't know what's driving it. So I'm not using software. I use my own technical analysis to watch. I've currently got I'm trading a range, because right now Bitcoin seems to keep going sideways. And so I'll trade that range back and forth with $1,000 spread. I'll trade the bottom and top again and again. And then when it does dip down below the bottom, and I have a stop loss in, and that my stop loss will trigger. But then when the stop loss triggers, of course, I get a notification that I had a stop loss trigger, and I look back to see what's going on with it, and then I typically buy back in when I see it turns and it has its first true pullback. That's when I'll get back in, and then I'll track it up for another. I like the $1,000 range because it's a nice. I know it's a round number. You should stay away from round numbers when you're trading, but somewhere in that $1,000 range, I feel like I make the bulk of my money there. I mean, I'm trading 20 Bitcoin back and forth, and so I'm not greedy. If I can make $1,000, I make $20,000 in a couple hours. I'm totally happy.
Man, that's huge. Good for you. We're very well said, man. That's a big chunk of change to be moving around. Do you think? What are your thoughts on the amount of Bitcoin being on exchange, being at all-time lows, all these big players buying, the halving coming up? What are you expecting over the next couple months?
Well, I have a target with my larger bag of Bitcoin that I'll sell somewhere around $130,000, $140,000. But I think it could go higher than that. It could go to 150 to 200. When the Bitcoin price gets into price exploration and you don't have any sell orders, when the people that are trading Bitcoin have been all filled with their sell orders, and the price just keeps exponentially going up, which it will. That's where a lot of money is to be made, and my trading strategy myself. That's just me. I'll take advantage of that. I might sell my big bag of Bitcoin, but it doesn't mean I'm out of the market. I'll look for the first pullback, and I'll jump back in, and then I'll let it track depending on how fast it's tracking. I'll let it track for another $500,000, and I sell again. I wait for the next pullback. You're going to get, you'll get steps along the way that you'll be able to make money.
Oh, that's super cool, man. I'm always so interested to think. So you think in the next couple months we're going to about 140? Is that what you're expecting?
No, I think by the middle of next year you're going to 140.
Okay. And what are you seeing with the wars, and how do you think that this is going to affect the markets? You think we're headed towards World War III, or you think that this is going to be?
I saw an interesting meme over the weekend, and it said if Israel retaliates against Iran, they think the Bitcoin price is going to eventually go to 100,000. And if Israel says no, we're not going to retaliate against Iran, well, the Bitcoin price is going to go to 100,000. And I think that the markets have responded the way that they do, but I don't think it's going to be a driving force in what's going to happen with Bitcoin. We'll eventually, over the next 10 years, we'll see a $1 million Bitcoin.
I agree. What do you think the minimum amount of Bitcoin exposure somebody should have in their portfolio? Are you advising your clients to get out of weaker money and get into a hard assets like Bitcoin, or what would your strategy be for somebody that's maybe not into Bitcoin right now and has zero exposure?
I don't give my clients financial advice. I'll share with them what I'm doing, but
what would you tell your family? Sorry, let's change the preface to that.
Yeah, I regularly tell my family. So I'll tell you a funny story about that. So I have a very good friend. He was my roommate in law school, Nate. And I called Nate when Bitcoin was in its low 20s. Or Nate called me and asked me about Bitcoin, and I told him buy. And it was just last March, wasn't that long ago. And he goes, "Really?" I'm like, "Yeah, really." I said, "Just put $25,000 in it. Just let it ride. Just see how it goes. Sell it." At that time, I was saying sell it when it was $80,000. So if you get 25 in and you 3x, sell it. Be happy. And he goes, "Okay, well, I'll run it up the flagpole with the wife, and we'll see what we do." And then I talked to him again when it was at about 40, and I said, "Did you get it?" "No, I didn't. She wouldn't let me do it." And so I said, "Well, now you should do it. You should still do it." I'll talk to her about it. And he didn't do it again. And then Bitcoin went to an all-time high, and of course, it's all over CNBC everywhere talking about it. And he calls me and says, "Man, I should have done it. I really should have done it. I'd be coming up with my 3x right now." And I'm like, "Yep, you should have, but you should." "No, really? It's too late. It's too late to get into Bitcoin. It's at its all-time high. It's not going to go any higher than that." I'm like, "No." I said, "I'll tell you what, Nate. If you buy Bitcoin right now," well, it was at like 62,000. I said, "If you buy Bitcoin right now, I will buy it back from you for what you paid. Anytime." And he's like, "Really?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure. I'll do that for you. Absolutely." And he still didn't buy it. And so some people you can't convince right now. I'm sure they'll be like me, standing on that porch talking to an investor or a guy that wanted me to invest in Bitcoin in 2016. And eventually, 4 years later, I came around. So I'm sure 4 years from now, the next bull cycle, he'll probably come around. But it takes time, and it's going to take institutionals time to figure it out, and they will eventually.
I think you couldn't be more accurate on that. We have a question over here in the live set that says, if you have Bitcoin to get out of fiat system, would you be paying taxes on it? Not sure. Maybe you can understand that one. I think he's saying that if you own Bitcoin, if you start moving your money into Bitcoin, are you having to pay taxes on it?
Yeah. So if you bought, let's say you just bought one Bitcoin, and today it's 67,500, and so you buy that one Bitcoin for 67.5, and you spend a little bit of Bitcoin on I don't know, an airline ticket. Somebody is selling you an airline ticket, and you buy it with Bitcoin. Well, you have a taxable event at that point. And so when you spend Bitcoin, you exchange Bitcoin for fiat at the fair market value of the thing that you're getting in exchange for your Bitcoin at that time. And so there's a taxable event there, and there's a reporting requirement.
And if you just buy Bitcoin and you never sell it, no taxable event?
No taxable event. And that's something that is important that I regularly tell clients that have access. I still have clients that have access to lenders that'll lend on their Bitcoin. And so if you borrow on your Bitcoin forever and you never sell it, you don't have a taxable event. And therefore you don't have any tax on that money you're receiving that you're borrowing. So if say Bitcoin's at 67.5, and someone's willing to loan you 30% of that, well, that's not income. That's you borrowing on an asset. And so you've now borrowed, $18,000, and that's not taxable. And then if Bitcoin goes up to $100,000 and you borrow a little bit more, not taxable. It goes up to $1 million and you borrow millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin or on your Bitcoin, you don't have tax on that money until you close that transaction, until you have a sales event, or until you have, if for instance, if Bitcoin then dumps to $10,000 and you're liquidated, when you have that liquidation event, you'll have another taxable event.
Wow, that's really cool. Is that what everybody's doing now, is just borrowing against their Bitcoin so that and then it's debt and you're paying that debt back to yourself? How does that work when your Bitcoin, say you bought it at 20,000 and then it went to 60,000. So your Bitcoin's now worth 60, but say you took a loan out against it when it was at 20, the asset goes up in value. Are you literally paying off that loan with the profits that you made?
No, you're paying off that loan. You're not ever paying off that loan. You're paying the interest on that loan, but you're not paying off the loan. And if you don't pay off the loan, or if you don't get liquidated, you don't end up with a taxable event. If you do pay off the loan, you don't have a taxable event. But if you sell the Bitcoin, that's the underlying asset, that's when you have the taxable event.
That's pretty interesting. That's really interesting, actually. So don't spend it till Trump abolishes the IRS then. That's what the life judge said. I think so, man. I think so. What did you think went down with the, Congress trying to implement like a flat tax, a 10% flat tax, and then our government saying, no, we're going to continue to, it just blows my mind that we had our founding fathers fought a revolution over a 3% tax. And here we are today. What is it? What would you say is the tax rate that you're paying with income tax, sales tax, property tax, life tax, death tax, inheritance tax? Like, what percentage are we at? Like 40? I've heard between 43 and 53%.
Yeah, it's high. It's 43 to 50%. And there's a lot of, there's always, Congress will keep talking about things as long as it keeps getting them elected. And so the idea of lowering your tax to a flat tax is a good one, in my opinion. But you'll hear I won't name any, but you'll hear some Congress people talking about taxing unrealized capital gains. And that's a good talking point, but it's unconstitutional. The U.S. Constitution does not allow a direct tax on property. And so you can't tax unrealized capital gains for your ordinary taxpayers without a constitutional amendment, which we know how polarized the U.S. Congress is. A constitutional amendment isn't anywhere in the cards. And so we're not going to see an unrealized capital gains tax. if it does get passed, it'll be ruled unconstitutional by the U.S. Supreme Court, and that's my take on it.
And it's crazy. It's I mean, it just feels like everybody's just getting crushed by this government, and it no longer does anything to make my life better or your life better or protect us or keep us safe. Our country's being invaded. They're sending billions to foreign countries. In all of your years of tax experience, have you ever found another country that taxes their citizens and sends that money to the United States?
No, I haven't.
I'm just curious. I mean, it seems like we're the world's piggy bank. Why are they? They're literally stealing our money and sending it to other countries, and nobody ever taxes their citizens and sends it to the United States. It's hard for me to believe that a generation is going to let this government continue just to pillage and loot and steal and take their wealth and give it to other countries.
Yeah, it's not an economic endeavor that the U.S. doesn't send money to other countries so they can make money. The argument that they make for why they send money to other countries is to stabilize the relations between the countries, and it's not a winning game. I mean, I think it's one of those things. Eventually, U.S. taxpayers will wake up to the fact of how much money gets sent to fund other countries, and we'll figure that out. But it just takes education and time.
And how much the U.S. government's the most profitable it's ever been the last year, right? Was 2022. They made more money in 2022 than they. I just don't get how our government's making $5 trillion, $6 trillion. Before 2008, we never even printed $6 trillion. And now they can't live within a budget of, $6 trillion, $7 trillion. It just is, it's insane. It's just, it doesn't get any better, does it? Does it ever get fixed?
I mean, printing money eventually, I mean, anyone who knows just basic economics knows that printing money isn't, I mean, for instance, if you're playing a game of Monopoly and you just keep, stealing from the bank, printing money, yeah, eventually everything's going to be priced accordingly. So if you keep grabbing, let's say you play a game of Monopoly and you had 5 stashes of Monopoly money sitting aside, and every time you needed money, you grabbed a little bit out of that stash and you're just creating more. Eventually rents are going to be, you go to Boardwalk and rent's going to be $5,000 for landing on Boardwalk. It's just, that's the way it works. Eventually the price will keep creeping up and you just keep grabbing from that bucket of money that you have. And the price is going to creep and you're going to have inflation and hyperinflation. And so there's been a lot of countries through the years who have had hyperinflation, who have experienced it, and many who have had to wean themselves off.
Do you think that's where we're headed, towards hyperinflation? Do you think it's going to happen in the next, how much longer can we, no country's ever been able to amass $35 trillion worth of debt, and we're creeping on its doorstep here. At what point do people stop using the US dollar? I mean, it seems like every statistic you look at is going downhill, like less and less every single day. Less countries are using the dollar. They're moving away from it, whether it's their own currency, whether it's BRICS, whether it's Bitcoin. The US dollar is getting crushed right now, but it's still, in comparison to these other currencies, it's like the fastest horse at the glue factory, as Greg Foss calls it. How much more of it can we take, do you think? Yeah,
we can take a lot more, but eventually it'll all come. It's a house of cards. You mentioned BRICS. BRICS would have never happened if the U.S. hadn't kept printing its own money. Things, you wouldn't look to alternatives if what you had was secure, and if it was something that you could rely, that wasn't going to be inflationary. And so that's one of the primary arguments for Bitcoin, really, is that if countries started going on the Bitcoin standard, they could rely on the fact that there's no more Bitcoin going to be printed, and that's when you truly see market adoption and the value of Bitcoin go parabolic.
I just put in a post on Twitter saying that I think Bitcoin is an IQ test. Bitcoin is an IQ. I can't even say it. Bitcoin is an IQ test for the entire world right now, and it's repricing the value of everything in real time. We're watching it. It's like everything. When you hold Bitcoin, everything gets exponentially cheaper around you, and when you save in fiat, you get exponentially more broke every single day, every single year. It's to the point where it's so bad. I mean, you're losing 10% of your wealth every single year if you don't have your money in something that's hard. And the lower and middle class people, I mean, they don't have the ability to get into investment vehicles like these big players do. And, you have to be an accredited investor to get into certain deals and opportunities that the little guy just doesn't have, where Bitcoin gives the ability to, somebody that's living almost paycheck to paycheck to put a little bit of money into property that's going to inflate. So I just hope more and more people like yourself keep promoting it, and you guys keep making it easier for people to do taxes. Give us your best rundown. I got your website over here. I'm going to pull it up here on the screen. Walk us through it. We got about 5 or 6 minutes left, and we'll kind of wrap it up.
Sure. So give us a call. Free consultations. Doesn't cost you anything. We'll talk about, it's a 1-hour consultation. We can talk about your trading. You can talk about what you've been doing. We can talk about whatever you want. Good thing about us is your conversation with me is attorney-client privilege. And so you can tell me, hey, I haven't paid taxes in 10 years on my Bitcoin. And I'll tell you what the exposure is there. We'll talk about it. We'll talk about the likelihood of getting caught. And we'll get you steered in the right direction.
And tell me about these 3 services over here. We have a Form 8940 Schedule D, tax preparation using third party. Walk us through these really quick in case some people are just joining us.
Sure. So the 8949 it's where you calculate your capital gains that you report on your Schedule D. And so the least expensive option you have is for us to prepare your 8949 for you and your Schedule D, and then you can use that information in your TurboTax or take it to your own preparer. And that's what I advise for anyone who, even if you have a tax accountant that you trusted for the last 20 years, which is the case with most tax accountants. We have a running joke that we only get new clients when tax accountants die or go out of business, retire. But if you have that tax preparer that you trust and you just want to have the crypto portion of your tax return done for you, that's where they would select the 8949. If you have CoinLedger or the like, that middle option is where you've already paid for CoinLedger, and we're going to use the data off of your CoinLedger in order to prepare your tax return for you. That's that middle option. And then the full service tax preparation includes API data collection, which we collect all the data from your exchanges that you link in through an API or download the CSV and send that to us so we can upload it. And we're available. We're not leaving you to your own devices. If you have trouble with the API, you can give us a call. We'll walk you through it, or we'll do it for you.
Man, this sounds like the best service that I've seen yet in the industry, and I've been here since 2017. So I really appreciate the services that your company's offering. I hope everybody swings over and gives you guys a chance at least get that free consultation from these gentlemen to make sure you're protecting yourself and your family. And it really sounds like you know your stuff, Ernest. So thank you for coming on the show, man. I greatly appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Man, and I'd like to get you back a couple times, maybe throughout the cycle. And you're always welcome back on my show. If anything big happens or any changes happen or anything like that people need to be aware of, or there's any deals where they get a discount because the government offers something on tax related, feel free to reach out, man. You can just book yourself another interview and come on the show anytime.
Sure. Thanks, Ryan.
God bless you, man. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, folks. So make sure if you guys, that is decrypted.tax. If you guys are not familiar with it, the links are down below in the show notes, and you guys can swing down there and please swing over there and follow Ernest and these guys over on Twitter. They're always putting out great educational content about helping you guys get your money situation right and protecting yourself from this tyrannical government. So God bless each and every one of you guys. Please consider smashing that like button on your way out to the show today. And we look forward to seeing you same place, same time. We'll be over on LFA TV today at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you guys want to go down the political rabbit hole, come over there, give us a follow, and we'll see you guys there exclusively on Rumble. God bless.
Run.